Okay, so thank you all for coming. Good to see you, Kunga. And everybody that's on YouTube, thank you very much for joining. And I hope you're able to follow with the books. If you need, more information about the books or anything, you can reach us at Buddha Practice Study at gmail.com. So we're on to chapter 14, and we're discussing the Buddha who, before he became Buddha, who was still Prince Siddhartha Gautama, living in the palace and so on. And he's now in his late 20s, middle 20s, late 20s, something like that. And we discussed that he was that beforehand he was doing all these great deeds. He was showing his prowess and being able to have the martial arts, to be able to practice the martial arts. He was very good at that, and also that he was very good at academics. He was very good at language skills and so on like that. So he's proving himself that he is will be a good leader. And the question is whether he's going to be a great spiritual leader, or he's going to be a great statesman, if you will. Yes, yes, Kunga. Your microphone is muted.
That chapter was introduced that the reason he had to do all these things was to prove he's going to be a good husband.
Right.
Like, it was the father of Gopa saying, he's proved to me he's going to be a good husband. Show me he can do all these things. So then they had all the stuff to prove that. I thought that was interesting to know. It's for the husband.
Very good. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
So he did a good job of that. And then they got married. And now it's a question whether he's going to be a universal monarch, a great king, or is he going to be a great spiritual leader? So we come to this chapter 14, which is a chapter called Dreams. So this, if you had an opportunity to read this, it's dreams between, it's a dream that the king had, the father of Siddhartha Gautama. His father had a dream. His wife, Gopa, had a dream. And the Bodhisattva himself, Siddhartha Gautama, had a dream. So this chapter goes into those dreams. So in keeping with our format, it would be really good to read this and then we can have a discussion about it. So I'll just look at my screen. So Bernie, would you read the first page? And then if a verse continues over to the next page, please continue to finish that verse. And then the next person reading will read on until they come to the end of the verse of the page that they're on. So Bernie, if you'll do the first one, then Brendan, if you'll read the second one, the second page, and then Kunga, if you'll read the third page, and then I'll read the fourth page. Alex does not have his book with him, so we can't ask him to read. So the four of us will read in this order. It's not a lot of pages. It's a relatively short chapter, so it won't be too much of a burden for us. If somebody comes in and it's a good opportunity for them to read, we'll ask them to read. But otherwise, it will just be the four of us.
Lance, could you remind us which chapter we're on?
14.
14.
Okay, you want me to start?
Yeah, is everybody ready?
And what is the number, the actual verse number that we're starting on?
14.
Okay, 14.
14.1.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so there's only 60 in this chapter, 60 verses in this chapter. So, like I said, it's okay. So, if everybody's ready, then Bernie, whenever you're ready, if you'll begin.
Okay, chapter 14, Dreams. Monks, while the god in this way was encouraging the Bodhisattva, a dream occurred to King Suddhodana. As he was sleeping, King Suddhodana dreamed that the Bodhisattva was leaving the palace in the quiet of the night, surrounded by a host of gods. As the Bodhisattva left the palace, the king saw that he had become ordained and was wearing the saffron-colored robes. As soon as the king awoke, he immediately asked the chamberlain, "Is the young prince with the consorts?" The chamber replied, "Yes, your majesty." King Suddhodana, sitting in the female quarters, thought to himself, "Then the young prince will surely leave us soon, as these omens foretell." As a sharp pain shot through his heart, he began to scheme. "My young prince must never even set foot in the palace gardens. He must always remain inside with the maidens, so that he will be addicted to their pleasures. He must never leave us." Then, in order that for the young prince to enjoy himself, King Suddhodana erected 3 palaces for each of the 3 seasons: hot, rainy, and cold. The hot season palace was very cool. The rainy season palace was both cool and warm, and the winter palace was naturally warm. As each of the palace, 500 guardsmen walked up and down the staircase. While they were ascending and descending the stairs, their calls could be heard for a distance of half a league. Everyone thought the young prince will never be able to leave without being noticed. Nevertheless, all the astrologers and fortune tellers kept making the same prediction, saying, "The young prince will leave through the gate of the auspiciousness." So the king had a massive door panels fit into the gate of auspiciousness, so large that it took 500 men to open and close each of them. The calls of the 500 men could be heard half a league away. The king provided the palaces with 5 desirable things, the likes of which had never been seen before. There were constantly young maidens around the Bodhisattva, playing their instruments, singing songs, and dancing for him.
Monks, at that point, the Bodhisattva told his charioteer, "I will go to the parks, so quick, go and prepare my chariot." But the charioteer went to King Suddhodana and told him, "Your Majesty, the young prince wishes to visit the parks." On hearing that, King Suddhodana thought to himself, "My young prince has never been to the parks to see their lovely grounds. However, if I allow him to visit the parks, the young prince must be surrounded by women. That way he can really enjoy amorous delights, and surely he will not leave us then." As King Suddhodana had such love for the Bodhisattva and wanted to please him, he dispatched bell ringers and made the following announcement to the people in his city. 7 days from now, the young prince will be visiting the grounds of the pleasure grove. You must all make sure that the young prince does not catch sight of anything disagreeable. So take care that everything that is not beautiful has been removed, and every nice thing pleasing to the senses has been brought forth. Accordingly, on the 7th day, the entire city was beautifully adorned. The parks were also adorned with canopies of cloth in various colors, as well as parasols, flags, and banners. The road on which the Bodhisattva was to proceed had been sprinkled and swept, sprayed with perfumed water, and scattered with fresh flower petals. Incense burners dispensed fragrant smoke, and along the road vases had been placed and plantain trees planted. The road was shaded with silk canopies in many colors, and festooned with nets of tiny jewel bells and decorative garlands and tassels. 4 army divisions had also taken position along the route, and members of the retinue were busy adorning the young prince's consorts. Amid all this activity, while the Bodhisattva was exiting through the eastern gate of the city on his way to the parks, through the power of the Bodhisattva, the gods from the pure realms emanated an old man on the road ahead. He was a decrepit old man, so skinny that the veins on his body protruded. His teeth had fallen out, and he was covered in wrinkles everywhere. His hair was gray, and he was hunched over like the rafters in a gable roof. Weak and broken, he had to use a stick to keep himself from falling. He was in pain, and his vitality was long gone. The only sounds that emerged from his throat were a dry wheezing. As he stood there on the road with the weight of his upper body supported by a stick, all his limbs were shaking and trembling.
When the Bodhisattva saw the man, he asked his charioteer the following, even though he already knew the answer. Charioteer, who is that decrepit man? He is so weak, emaciated, and wrinkled. His head is all gray, his teeth are few and far between, and his body is so skinny. Holding his stick, he sways in discomfort from side to side. The charioteer replied, Your Highness, that man is overcome by old age. His senses are weak and he suffers greatly, and his strength and energy are gone. His relatives despise him, and no one looks after him. Unable to function, he has been abandoned like a piece of wood in the forest. The Bodhisattva then asked, Is that a practice specific to his family, or could that happen to anyone? Quick, tell me the truth. Then I'll reflect on what I hear. The charioteer replied, Your Highness, that is not the practice of his caste or the state. For all beings, old age overcomes youth. Even your father, mother, friends, and relatives are not free from old age, nor is any other class of people. The Bodhisattva then remarked, Charioteer, how sad. Childish and ignorant beings do not see old age, proud and crazed that they are in youth. I will go back now. Quick, turn my chariot around. If I shall also be old, how can I enjoy myself and play games? So the Bodhisattva turned his fine chariot around and returned to the city. However, monks, sometime later, while the Bodhisattva was setting out for the parks through the southern city gate, again accompanied by a large parade, he saw on the road a man suffering from disease. His body was weak and he was suffering greatly, as he lay in his own urine and feces. There was no one to take care of him or assist him, and he was breathing only with the greatest difficulty. When the Bodhisattva saw this man, he turned to the charioteer and asked him the following, even though he already knew the answer.
Charioteer, the body of this poor man is covered in sores and discolored. His senses are weak. He is crippled, and he breathes so heavily. He is so skinny. His belly is in convulsions, and he suffers. He is lying in his own excrement in a revolting state. The charioteer replied, Your Highness, that man is seriously ill. Confronted by the terrors of disease, he is now on the brink of death. The splendor of his former health is gone, and his strength has been lost. He has no protection, refuge, or sanctuary, and nowhere to go. The Bodhisattva then exclaimed, Health is just like a play in a dream. What wise person, having witnessed such unbearable terrors of disease, would have a positive view of playful games? And so, monks, once again, the Bodhisattva turned his beautiful chariot around and returned to the city. However, monks, sometime later, while the Bodhisattva was setting out for the parks through the western city gate, accompanied by a large parade, he saw on the road a dead man who had reached his end. The corpse was lying on a stretcher, covered by a cotton cloth. It was surrounded by a group of relatives who wailed, cried, and lamented. As they followed the deceased, they pulled out their hair, threw dust in their heads, beat their chests, and lamented loudly. When he saw this, the Bodhisattva turned to the charioteer and asked him the following, even though he already knew the answer. Charioteer, who is this man carried on the stretcher? The other people have surrounded him, and they keep pulling their hair, scratching their faces with their fingernails, throwing dust on their heads, beating their chests, and crying in distress. The charioteer replied, Your Highness, this man has died in Zambupipa. Never again shall he see his parents, wife, or children. He must abandon his possessions, his house, his friends, and his relatives, and proceed to the next world, where he shall never see his relatives again.
The Bodhisattva exclaimed, How sad that old age destroys youth. How sad that health is destroyed by various sicknesses. How sad that the life of a wise man does not last long. How sad that scholars are attached to pleasure. Even if there were no old age, sickness, or death, the five aggregates would still be ridden by great suffering. What then about old age, sickness, and death, which always occur together? Well then, turn around. We'll think about how to be liberated from this state. And so monks, once again, the Bodhisattva turned his fine chariot around and returned to the city. Monks, sometime later, when the Bodhisattva was setting out for the parks through the northern city gate, through the power of the Bodhisattvas, the gods emanated a mendicant in the street where they were passing. The Bodhisattva saw the mendicant and noted that he was peaceful. He was self-controlled and restrained. He had pure conduct, and his eyes didn't wander, but looked down ahead at a distance of 6 feet. His behavior was beautiful and exquisite, as was the way he walked. The way he looked ahead and to the left and to the right was also beautiful. When he bent and stretched his limbs, he did so in an exquisite manner. The way he wore his robes and his offering bowl was delightful to see. When he saw this monk, the Bodhisattva turned to the charioteer and asked him the following, even though he already knew the answer. Charioteer, who is this peaceful and calm person? He walks with his eyes towards the ground at a distance of 6 feet. His clothes are saffron colored, and his actions are peaceful. He carries his offering bowl and is not overbearing or haughty. The charioteer replied, Your Highness, that person is what we call a monk. He has abandoned sensual enjoyments and now acts like a very gentle manner. He has become a mendicant and searches for peace. Free from attachment and anger, he lives from alms.
The Bodhisattva said, What you say is very true, and I agree. Wise beings always praise the life of a monk. Such a life is beneficial for oneself, and it also helps others. It is a happy life that results in the sweet nectar of immortality. And so, monks, once again the Bodhisattva turned his fine chariot around and returned to the city. Monks, King Suddhodana, both saw and heard that the Bodhisattva had been inspired in these ways. So in order to guard the Bodhisattva even more, he erected a perimeter wall around the palace, dug trenches, and strengthened the gates. He also posted guards, alerted his brave soldiers, and even prepared the cavalry. All of them were in full armor. In order to guard the Bodhisattva, he placed a full army division at each of the junctions by the 4 city gates to keep watch day and night, and told them to prevent the Bodhisattva from eloping. At the quarters of the consorts, he directed everyone to continuously sing and play music, and not to stop for even a moment. You must apply all your skills and pleasure in games, he told them. Use all your female trickery and keep persevering with the young prince, so that when his mind becomes attached to you, he will not want to leave for the sake of ordination. On this topic it is said, At the gates there are men fond of combat, holding their swords aloft. There are elephants, horses, chariots, and men in armor on rows of elephants. Ditches have been dug, and tall walls and archways with turrets have been built. There are gates so solid that their noise can be heard for several miles. All the Sakyas are worried and keep guard day and night. The great noise of the powerful army is heard everywhere. The city is in turmoil and full of terrified cries. May the gentle one not depart. And the holder of the Sakya lineage leaves, if the holder of the Sakya lineage leaves, this royal line will be broken. Women are told, You must never stop your songs and music. You must make him stay. So captivate his mind with your games of pleasure. Demonstrate all your many ways of female trickery and make a good effort. Watch over him and create hindrances so that the gentle being does not depart.
These are omens that foretell the departure of the best of charioteers. The swans, cranes, peacocks, mynas, and parrots do not make any sounds. They sit on terraces, by palace windows, on gateways, parapets, and pedestals. Depressed, unhappy, and miserable, they hang their heads and remain silent. Even the beautiful lotuses in the ponds and the pools wither and die. The foliage and flowers in the trees disappear, and the trees blossom no more. The strings on the lutes and the sitars break for no apparent reason. The drums, big and small, all break when touched and emit no sounds. The whole city is disturbed and overcome by lethargy. Nobody has any desire for dancing, singing, or making merry. Even the king is severely depressed and given to brooding. He wonders, oh no, will the Sakya lineage of such fortune now be destroyed? As Gopa and the prince lie asleep in the same bed, a dream appears to Gopa in the middle of the night. He dreams that the entire earth with all its mountains is shaken. The trees are rocked by the wind, and uprooted they fall to the ground. The sun, the moon, the stars that adorn them fall from the sky onto the earth. She sees her shorn off hair in her right hand and her diadem crumbling in pieces. Her hair and feet are cut off, and she finds herself naked. Her hands and feet are cut off, and she finds herself naked. Her pearl necklace and the jewels in her girdle break apart. The four legs of her bed break off, and she ends up lying on the ground. The beautiful and splendorous handle of the king's parasol is broken. All her ornaments fall off and are scattered about and carried off by water. Her husband's ornaments, clothes, and crown lie scattered on their bed. Torches are carried out from the city, which is left behind in darkness. The beautiful jeweled lattices she sees in her sleep are broken. The tassels of pearl fall off, and the ocean is stirred. She dreams that Meru, the king of mountains, is shaken in its foundation.
These are the dreams that appear to the daughter of the Sakyas. As she awakens with tearful eyes, she asks her husband, Lord, what is going to befall me? Please tell me the meaning of these dreams. My memory is confused, and I cannot see clearly. My heart is aching. The Lord replies to Gopa in a voice as sweet as the nightingale, a drum or a Brahma. Cheer up, nothing bad is in store for you. Only beings who have created previous merit have such dreams. People for whom there is suffering in store should never dream like that. When you dream that the earth is shaken and the mountains crumble to the earth, it shows that gods, nagas, rakshasas, and bhutas all rank you as the highest among those worthy of worship. When you dream that the trees are uprooted and you cut off your hair with your right hand, it shows that you, Gopa, will quickly cut the web of afflictions and free yourself from the web of viewing conditioned phenomena. When you dream that the sun and the moon fall to the ground and that the stars fall as well, it shows that you, Gopa, will quickly conquer the enemy of afflictions and will become worthy of offerings and praise from the world. When you dream that your pearl necklace is torn and that you are naked and your body is mutilated, it shows that you, Gopa, can soon leave your female body and swiftly attain a male body. When you dream that the legs of your bed break off and the precious handle of the parasol is broken, it shows that you, Gopa, shall quickly cross the four rivers and see me as the single parasol bearer in the triple universe. When you dream that your jewelry is carried off by water and my clothes and crown are left behind on my throne, it shows that you, Gopa, shall quickly see me adorned with signs and receiving the praise of the entire world. When you dream that billions of lights leave the city and plunge into darkness, it shows, Gopa, that soon I will illuminate with the light of knowledge the entire world, which is plagued by delusion and the darkness of ignorance.
When you dream that your pearl necklace breaks and your beautiful golden chain is broken, it shows that you, Gopa, shall quickly cut the web of afflictions and remove your chain of conceptual perception. Gopa, since you pay homage to me and always make offerings with the highest respect, you shall never go to the lower realms or meet with suffering. Soon you shall have happiness and fortune. In the past I made abundant offerings. I guarded my discipline and always trained in forbearance. Therefore, whoever has faith in me shall find happiness and fortune. For a limitless number of millions of eons in cyclic existence, I have trained in the perfect path to awakening. Therefore, whoever has faith in me shall eliminate the three lower realms. So be happy and do not be depressed. be fulfilled and joyful. Soon you shall attain happiness and fortune. Gopa, with such good omens, lay down and sleep. Those who are nourished by the splendor of merit and have merit in their heart will see in their dreams splendorous signs which occur to supreme beings who've accumulated virtuous karma at the time of their departure from home. Such a being dreams that the waters of the four great oceans are stirred with the strokes of his hand and feet. The entire earth becomes his bed, and the king of mountains is his pillow. He sees in his dreams a light shining forth that clears away the deep darkness of the world. Our parasol emerges from the ground and covers the entire three worlds. Touched by this radiance, the misery of those who suffer disappear.
In his dream, 4 white and black animals lick his feet. Birds of 4 colors change into 1 color. He climbs an abhorrent and revolting mountain of excrement, yet he succeeds and remains free from stains. In his dream, he further sees rivers overflowing and many billions of beings swept away. Building a boat, he frees himself and can save others. He takes them to the best of shores, the one that is free from fear and suffering. He further sees many beings struck with illness. Their health and splendor is gone, and their strength is weak. He becomes a doctor and dispenses many medicines, curing billions of beings of their many diseases. He sits on a lion throne on the central mountain. His students join their palms, and the gods all venerate him. He sees himself victorious in the midst of a battle, with the immortals in the sky cheering him in joyous voices. Such signs did the Bodhisattva see in his dreams, and he saw the fulfillment of his virtuous and excellent conduct. The gods and humans who heard this were delighted and thought, soon he shall become the god of humans and gods. This concludes the 14th chapter on dreams.
Very good, thank you. In all the stories that I've heard of the Buddha, this is the first time I've heard of these dreams like this. So this was very good. I enjoyed this very much. Had you heard this before, Bernie or Kunga, in any of the scriptures that you've read?
No, it's the dreams that I've never heard of these before. Of course, his journey through the city and seeing the 4 sights, that's in pretty much all the different scriptures. But this is the first time I read about the different dreams.
So, what's your comment on this, Bernie?
Well, it's an elaboration. They take the point that the king doesn't want his son to leave the palace, and they build it up by making a gate so big that only 500 takes 500 people to open it, and 500 guards going up and down the stairs. So they're just kind of exaggerating to make a point. It's just taking the basic story of the Buddha's realization of the suffering of the world and making it somewhat more elaborate. The dreams part is new, but there's nothing surprising in the dream. It's sort of just amplifying the basic point. The king doesn't want his son to leave, and so has a dream that he will leave. His wife, of course, doesn't want him to leave either, so she has a dream, but the Bodhisattva interprets it in such a way as to make it a positive story. And the Bodhisattva has a dream of his future enlightenment.
Okay. Brendan, you have a comment about this?
Yeah, a few things. I read a quote before this meeting talking about the Dharma path and how you must suffer terribly in order to really embrace the Dharma path and to go down it. And so I don't know if that's true or not. I think probably everybody in the Zoom room has experienced profound suffering because it's part of samsara. It's part of being a human being. But the whole point is that that suffering shows you that that samsara is real and that you need to find a way to overcome it through the Dharma path. And so I'm struck in reading this just how much his father tries to protect him from the reality of samsara, and how it's clear to the Buddha that this is what life is really all about, that he's being tricked in a way and living in this fantasy land. So not very profound, but that's my commentary.
Okay. We'll come back. I want to circle back maybe a couple times. We have plenty of time to talk about this. Kunga, what's your observations about this? What are your comments on this chapter?
Well, I thought that the chapter, being called dreams, and I think about all the Buddhist teachings that say that this life is like a dream, like a mirage, like an illusion, like a hallucination. So I thought it was a nice tie-in with that. And they had these dreams that were kind of foretelling what was going to happen. But really they're dreams within dreams, right? So the idea is that even these old age, birth, death, and sickness, they're all kind of delusions, because they're just these we're taking these moments of life, and we're focusing on them and labeling them and acting as if that's a certain place, if we were to look at our own life, when do we decide that we're actually becoming old, or when do we decide that we're actually sick? We know it's a gradual process, but we kind of arbitrarily pick a time when we say we're old or we're sick. And the same with death too. We can say death is the time that somebody stops breathing, but when someone gets a terminal illness, getting that news for the first time is like sort of being pronounced with a death sentence. They have a limited amount of time to live, and it often changes their perspective on life, just knowing that they're going to die in a short period of time. The other thing that struck me was, the images that he encounters of the old age, sickness, and death, because I encounter those images all the time. It's not unusual for me to come on to have a patient, who's very old and frail. I was just at a visit today with a guy who only weighs 89 pounds, and he struggles to breathe. He is on oxygen all the time. And I was at a visit at a patient last week, Wednesday, and he was covered in excrement and urine and couldn't care for himself. And we had to bathe him during that visit. And he had all these tubes coming out of him for fluids and things. So those things seem very real to me. I had on call this visit over the weekend where I had to call somebody who had just lost their partner, and they were very upset, even contemplating suicide because of their grief. And then, the foresight of the monk, I think about, participating in temple service, or even going to the mass at church and having the priest up there, reminding you of that dedication to the holy life. So it's kind of interesting, I feel like maybe all of us get it too. I mean, I really have it in a literal way every week, but probably all of us are encountering sickness, old age, and death, every day of our lives. If we really think about it, we listen to the news. It's pretty easy to get sickness, old age, and death through the news, even in a short, like a 5 or 10 minute telecast. Maybe the spiritual part of it, though, encountering the spiritual life, I think people can go, if they don't make an effort, it's pretty easy to have that part of your life kind of not have that experience on a regular basis. It doesn't seem to be as important part of our culture, unless you make your way, or if you're towards it, it's very easy to kind of miss that part. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Very good. Very interesting. I think, the way my comment is, first we saw the father, and he had this great fear that he was going to lose his son, who's going to leave the palace, and that the the lineage of his kingdom was going to go away and so on. So that was a major reason why he wanted to hold on and protect his son and to keep him in the palace so that the king wouldn't lose the lineage, wouldn't lose that monarchy and so on. That seemed to be what was most important to him. And then his wife, Gopa, she was, in her dream, she was seeing everything fall apart. She was seeing, her clothing fall apart. She was seeing her body fall apart. She was seeing her bed fall apart. She was seeing everything falling apart. And the Bodhisattva assured her that this was good news, that only a person of her stature would have this kind of dream, and try and turn it around for her, so that she felt that she was in a good place, that she had a blessed life, and that this was normal for somebody in that position and so on, and that she should embrace what the changes that are to come and so on. And then the Bodhisattva having his dream. In his dream, he had nothing but a positive attitude. There was no negativity at all in his observation. I mean, everything was positive for him. Everything was clear for him. And it wasn't that the glass was half full or half empty, it was half full, and he saw that the future was going to be good. He saw the positive things that could happen as a result, and maybe he would have the power, the ability to be able to lead other beings, the world, in fact, to that kind of a positive attitude, toward that loving attitude, to that happy, peaceful attitude and so on. So at first take, those are the things that I noticed about the story. I'd like to ask everybody about what Brendan was saying, that you mentioned that you had just heard or read something earlier today or something, that suffering is required, if I can use these terms, paraphrase, that suffering is required in order to be liberated or to be enlightened or to be freed from that suffering. Bernie, what do you think about that?
Well, it depends on who you are. It depends. What's tough is to break addictions. If you're addicted to doing something, you're going to have to break that addiction at some point or other. And doing that is not easy, and it's not always pleasurable. There's always a period when you give something up that you have to suffer a bit. And also, well, it depends how you practice. To get enlightened requires a discipline. It's not something that is going to happen casually. It doesn't happen all by itself. It's not like you get out of bed one morning and then you're enlightened, unless you've been practicing a lot in the previous years. So discipline means doing the work when you don't want to do the work. And that also involves a certain amount of suffering. And so generally, what people want to do is they want to experience everything everything nice at the moment that you have. It's like, a baby reaching out for whatever bright object, shiny object is right in front of them. And you have to learn to restrain that if you want to develop the discipline that comes with meditation. Now, of course, this isn't, so there's a certain amount of suffering. It isn't that way all the time. As a matter of fact, the further along you get on the path, the easier it gets. So, because one replaces the joys of a mundane life, whatever you want to call it, our ordinary life, with the joys of which comes from the practice of meditation. So you shouldn't think that it's all pain and suffering all the way along the path, but it's not a primrose path either. So there's a certain amount of balance of hard work and discipline and suffering that comes along with any kind of serious practice. I don't know if I could say anything more about it than that. Maybe somebody else could say it better.
Well, Brendan, what's your comment? What did when you read or you heard about that suffering is required, if I can paraphrase that, how did it land on you? What do you think of that?
So I think it might be helpful if I read the exact quote, because I don't think I did very well. I have on my phone, I have a folder called Medicine Buddha where I screenshot and keep every single Buddhist image or quote or anything that I think is helpful to me. So that's where I'm finding this.
You're so organized.
For important things, but not for everything. But the Dharma is important. So examine closely. The world is not as it seems. You will come to reality through suffering. If you have not suffered terribly, you simply are not ready. Whatever wisdom there may be, untried and untested. Loss is necessary to lose your trust and the stability of conventional reality. So that loss is necessary to lose your trust and the stability of conventional reality. It's very tempting to be like Siddhartha there in the palace, and conventional reality seems great, right? Because his father is making it a very nice existence. Most of us, I think, would like that existence, at least for a time. But in order to lose that faith, he has to venture out. He has to see samsara. So that this discussion tonight made me think of that quote. So that's
Okay.
and I'll add that to stay in the palace and just have fun, I don't think that's what anybody is really called to. I mean, that's just, there's an old
That's a good point.
Twilight Zone episode where in black and white, where the person dies and they think they're in heaven, and it's just lust and gambling and drink and good food, and they're having a blast. But then at the end of it, they realize, well, no, actually, this is all there is, and for eternity, and they're actually in hell. So anyway.
Alex, you made a comment, and I'm sorry I didn't call on you before, but your picture was blacked out, and my eye didn't catch it. So please add your comments. So now your microphone is muted.
Yeah, no worries. I enjoyed hearing all the comments and had my own thoughts together. So yeah, I agree with all that, and I was even going to say some of that myself. But another point that kind of was new to me hearing the story is that the Buddha knew the answer, but he would still ask his assistant. So that was an interesting revelation in way to me. So so now I'm thinking, like, why would he do that? To confirm to himself, but probably no. But maybe he already starting to do his kind of like enlightenment work for helping other people to get enlightened as well. That's
Well,
that's
why
my
not?
take.
Why not? Do you think that he wasn't susceptible to, maybe he was thinking, well, are my thoughts, is my heart, is my life, is it completely valid? And so he's kind of questioning the charioteer who's showing him these things and saying, well, are my thoughts valid? Does he see the same thing that I'm seeing?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of natural. We could think of it as a very natural answer because he knew the answer, but everything in his life was contradicting to the answer that he knew, right? So like he never seen anybody old, he never seen anybody dying. But but I mean he could see his mind could make conclusions about how naturally things would go, like we can make those conclusions, but we just don't see the result in front of our eyes. So I think he wanted to maybe also he wanted to confirm for himself that his conclusions are valid, and that is a very natural thing to do for anyone.
What do you think
It's
about?
just interesting that I never heard any other retelling of this story that he already knew the answer and was doing this conversation.
Well, at this time he was still Bodhisattva, so he
Right,
wasn't
and he was pretty
he
young.
wasn't he
Like
wasn't perfectly realized at this point, so he still had a little bit of doubt, a little bit of lack of confidence.
yeah, perhaps so.
What do you think of the point of the suffering? Is suffering required for liberation? What do you think of that?
I mean, depends what you mean by liberation. You mean a loss of conceptual understanding?
Well, I don't know, enlightenment. How was it? How was it phrased, Brendan, in that quote?
It's
Well,
it's an interesting question, especially when posed to a scientist. From mathematical point of view, or logical, it probably doesn't have to be because like you can logically arrive to the conclusions, but from psychological point of view or human psychology point of view, I would say almost impossible because uh, like we condition to certain things and we really won't believe that bad things can happen unless they do really happen to us. It's kind of like uh, I guess maybe that is a good thing. I mean, there are people that always like think things go the worst thing possible, the worst way possible, right? But I think those people are quite rare, and usually it's because of some bad experience they have in the past. Normally, people have like rather rosy glasses on their eyes and think if things were pretty good for them, they would think they'll continue to be that good forever. Why would they do otherwise?
Thank you. Brendan, how
Please
was
feel
the
free to
phrase?
disagree.
Well, we'll discuss it. So, Brendan, how was it phrased that the suffering leads to enlightenment, or what was it?
yeah, I'll read it again. Examine closely. The world is not as it seems. You will come to reality through suffering. If you have not suffered terribly, you simply are not ready. Whatever wisdom there may be, untried and untested. Loss is necessary to lose your trust and the stability of conventional reality. It's almost like it's saying, look, if you've never really experienced samsara and all its ugliness, then why would you be attracted to the Dharma path in the first place? That's how I take it.
Okay. Kunga, how about you? What's your comment on this?
So sometimes the Buddha's middle way is talked about in terms of the six realms, and the human realm, the realm that we're in, which is like the fourth realm, is to have just the right amount of suffering so that to inspire us on our spiritual path, right? If we're in lower realms, the hell realm, hungry ghost realm, or the animal realm, it's too much suffering, to practice. And if we're in the jealous God realm or the heaven realm, it's too much pleasure to practice. Kind of like the Buddha, the father of the Buddha was trying to put him in the heaven realm so that he wouldn't, he wouldn't be inspired to practice. I think that even in the human realm, we can think about those 6 realms being evident. Like if you're in a situation where, I imagine in Lebanon, it's very hard to have spiritual practice right now. If you're in a war zone, it's very difficult to have a spiritual practice. If you're overwhelmed with your physical needs for safety and for food, grief or terror, if you have a spiritual practice, you can fall back into that. But if you don't have one, it's very difficult to occupy, right? There's no time, right? There are more immediate concerns, life and death concerns. So that would be an example of having, too much suffering in this human life to really be on the spiritual path. And then the other extreme is, if you're so wealthy and you're just so distracted, it's pretty tough to be on the spiritual path. I think it's pretty difficult for Donald Trump to be on the spiritual path. He's got too much going on in his plate as far as like material type things, or too much greed, or too much, wealth for power. There's no room for the spiritual path in his life right now. So, he seems to have a lot of other material things, right? A lot of power, some wealth, but the spiritual path is just not open to him right now because of that. I think, though, that the suffering that is being talked about in that quote that is shared is more of an existential suffering, like, because it seems to be talking more about questioning existence as you perceive it normally. Like, you need to really start to question the way the world is working to feel like there is something beyond that, something more important than that. It's more than just getting ahead. It's more than just, making money or having a family or going on vacations. You have to question that idea of existence is all just about sort of accumulating, because in the end, you're going to die, and everyone you love is going to die, and all those activities that you enjoy are just going to be a memory. So I feel like that quote, that's what it made me think of. It's like it's this existential suffering has to be a part of to help drive your spiritual path. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all very good. I think, for myself, the question about the suffering and everything, it's hard for me to lay it on to other people or whatever. I got to look at it through my own lens. And, I feel like I've had a very fortunate life, and my suffering has been very small. At times it seemed it was huge and everything, but when it was huge, when my suffering, it came from my poor decisions, really, to follow some path, or to do something, or to want something, or to be blinded by some idea or something like that, the combination of the 5 poisons that we talk about all the time. And the lowest point of my life, was a time when I really had made a series of bad decisions and everything. And I just felt so helpless about it. And I felt like to help me out of this, I needed somebody that I could care for. And that was going to bring me out of it, because, I was only thinking about myself when making all these bad decisions and so on, and how I was suffering and so on like that. And I just wanted somebody to care for. I didn't have anybody in my life. And, you could call it, some kind of a miracle or something like that. But it wasn't too long after that I met somebody that we shared, and somebody that could care for me, but more importantly, somebody that I could care for. And it became a turning point in my life. And then I got back on track to where I was before I started making all these series of bad decisions. I got back on to being a fortunate being who had a fortunate life and so on. In past lives, you know, I'm sure we all have suffered greatly. We've all been through that. You know, if we haven't been in war now, we may have been in war in a past life, or at least we had that transpersonal experience of being able to recall that, you know, being part of the continuum and so on like that. But I felt like this life has been a fortunate life for me, and so I've been so that was a hitting bottom. You know, where do we hit bottom? You know, so for me, it was a relatively, didn't have to go far, you know, to be able to do that and to be able to recognize or have a sense of what it was that was going to pull me out of it. You know, it was working for somebody else that was going to pull me out of it. And I think that's one of the continuing threads that goes through the Dharma of being a bodhisattva, is that we have to do this for the benefit of others. And it's through the benefit of others that we actually help ourselves to help more beings and so on. So that's something that has been very important to me, to be able to see that. So, so thank you. Any other comments about this chapter, about the dreams, or about, you know, the substance of the dreams or suffering that we've been talking about? Any other thoughts about this? Yes, Kunga.
So when we think about the Buddha's enlightenment and he has his battle with Mara, sometimes I've read people translate that as the Buddha's kind of battling his own demons, his own internal demons. Mara is just like another side, like a shadow side of the Buddha.
Well, when did he have a battle with Mara? When did he have a battle with Mara?
You know, when he's having his enlightenment, when he's sitting under the Bodhi tree.
Well, was it a battle or was it just a temptation?
We could call it temptation. Yeah. When Mara brings the army and he brings his daughters.
Right.
Okay. So this chapter, dreams, I was thinking about, you know, what if we thought of the king and the charioteer is really just being other aspects of the Buddha's own personality. Like, so the king is this part of his personality that says, hey, you know, this is nice. You know, let's just stay in here where all the pleasure is. You know, we can increase the pleasure. You know, let's just increase the pleasure, you know, and we're going to guard the sense gates, you know, we're not going to look out and see anything that's going to offend us or something. We're just going to, you know, kind of speed ourselves this pleasure.
But the Buddha couldn't be seduced, or the Bodhisattva couldn't be seduced.
Right. He couldn't seduce himself. So like in this idea, the king is just a part of his personality. And then the charioteer, when he's telling the charioteer, he already knew the answer. He's like, you know, trying to deny, you know, he himself knows that sickness, old age, and death exists. You know, we all know that exists, but he was trying to pretend it didn't exist. You know, he trying to say like, oh, I don't know what that means, you know, but he really knew deep inside, you know, what that was about. You know, we all know what that's about. I don't think you have to teach a child, you know, what sickness and death and old age, you know, they recognize those things and they start to ask about it. What is that? You know, that's different. So that's just another way I thought about it, is just like thinking of this as more of from a psychological reading, you know, rather than these being all these characters outside the Buddha, this is just all parts of his personality, sort of, you know, like something that we could see as happening in ourselves as well. You know, that we try and see the world in these different ways, but somehow we overcome these kind of naive views of the world. You know, we overcome this belief that we can just have pleasure all the time without ever having suffering. And we overcome these beliefs that we're never going to get old or get sick or die, you know, that through our experiences, we're able to overcome that and then kind of settle with those beliefs. I'm not saying it says that literally in here. I'm just saying that's a reading that is meaningful to me as well. Thank you.
Good. That's a healthy investigation. Any other comments?
I'd like to comment on the monk that we read about, how the monk carried himself and how austere he was and such a noble figure. I was reading a work of fiction that had to do with the triads in Hong Kong, organized crime, and they go into this place for the sumptuous feast, and the food is just amazing the way it's described, the food and the drink and the clothes and the cars and how nice all that is. It seems nice, but it seems that whenever you're involved in a lifestyle like that, the wrong people always end up getting hurt, right? So there's a tremendous benefit to you if you like nice things, but you know, people end up getting hurt through your illicit activity. To me, the monk is the opposite of that. And when you strip away all the ego and all the desire for nice things, and you don't even want to hurt an insect, let alone a human being, you wind up a lot like the monk in the passage. So I thought that was very moving to me. Ego is a big deal for a lot of people. And I also wanted to mention something regarding samsara equal to nirvana. And I could never figure that out. That made no sense to me. And it's starting to make a little bit more sense to me, because we were talking about suffering earlier, but how much suffering do we inflict on ourselves? And how much suffering do we inflict on ourselves through wrong thought and wrong view? And one thing Bernie said a long time ago in this meeting, not today, but another meeting, is that so much of the suffering in Western culture is not physical, like it's mental. And I think that, I mean, back in my 20s, there was a job I wanted and I didn't get it. And I was despondent and I was upset. The world is so unfair. Now I realize, no, that was just a speed bump. The problem was really my wrong view and how I took it, and not that loss of an opportunity. So I think we need to be careful when we talk about, now, the Kunga's example, yeah, there's certainly people that are suffering terribly, but I think often it's more our wrong view. We impose the suffering on ourselves, is the point I'm making. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment?
I'll make a comment. The samsara is nirvana. I think that has to do with non-duality. That if you're experiencing non-duality, well, there can't be samsara and there can't be nirvana. There's only what is. So that's where that idea comes from. I've also heard it said that the only place that you can have, the only experience you can have of nirvana is in the present moment. And since you're in the present moment in samsara, that's where you're going to have your nirvana experience. If you're seeking to escape from where you are, that's going to always be a barrier, because the experience has to happen in the moment you're in.
Well, is that a matter of attitude?
I think it has to be a deeper experience than attitude. I don't think.
Well, how would you express what the Buddha was dreaming of? The Buddha or the Bodhisattva's dream was, I think, expressing the idea of, he didn't say it this way, but he wasn't looking at the duality and calling it a duality. He only saw it one way. Where misery disappears, he said. So it was 14.53 and onward. 14.53. Such a being dreams that the waters in the four great oceans are stirred with the strokes of his hands and feet. Are stirred with the strokes of his hands and feet. In other words, he's creating whatever is going on. The entire earth becomes his bed, and the king of mountains is his pillow. Then the next verse says, he sees in his dreams a light shining forth that clears away the deep darkness of the world. A parasol emerges from the ground and covers the entire three worlds. Touched by his by this radiance, the misery of those who suffer disappears. The parasol in the Eightfold Path, we got right view and we got right resolve. And the right resolve is doing for others, is being on the path, is doing these things. And that in itself becomes protection. That becomes the parasol, doing for others. And I think that's what I was trying to explain before. So I'm sorry if I took you off track there, but everything in the dream after that, everything just comes together. Everything just becomes no despair. And was it in 14.52? It says, those who are nourished by the splendor of merit, those who are nourished by the splendor of merit and have merit in their heart will see their dreams splendorous signs, which occur to supreme beings who have accumulated virtuous karma at the time of their departure from home. So I think this goes to that point. We don't know what we did in the past. It doesn't matter. We are here. And if we've got that fortunate life, to recognize that, seize that, maintain that, and be able to carry it forward, to be able to use it over and over again for the benefit of all the beings. If we selfishly hold on to it, maybe at best we become a Pratyeka Buddha.
Being in the present moment and doing for others, this is hard. This is, sometimes I just want to selfishly escape to some, nirvana in the mountains like an old Chinese print, but I'm hearing that's not really what we're called to do.
Well, is that just taking a break, or is it really trying to escape?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
I think that the middle way dictates that there's a time to go on retreat, there's a time to go to the caves, and there's a time to be immersed outside the palace in helping others.
I agree.
I would love to get Kunga's perspective though on nirvana, the non-duality. Is that a Tibetan Buddhist concept that nirvana is equal to samsara ultimately because of the non-duality, or is that more of a Zen thing? I'm a little confused by that. Anybody that can help me out?
Well, I think, excuse me, I'll let Kunga say something, but I just want to say that I think they're both conceptual. It's both part of phenomenal nature.
The idea that nirvana and samsara are the same is one of the basic ideas. Well, we shouldn't say that they're the same. We should say that they have the same nature, which is emptiness.
Right.
It's basic, and it's said explicitly in Nagarjuna's root text on the middle way. So it's a basic idea of Mahayana Buddhism. It's not just Tibetan Buddhism. So all Mahayana Buddhist schools, the Tibetan Buddhism, Zen will agree with that point.
Kunga, I'd cut you off 10 minutes ago. So if you want.
I think that when we talk about in Tibetan Buddhism, when we talk about the Dharmakaya, we talk about being beyond concepts, that I think that's that land of non-duality. it can't be conceptualized. You can't talk about it. You can't think about it. You have to experience it. And that's the idea that you're getting at. I think, you know, we want to say nirvana, and sometimes in books it's described as like the person has an awakening experience, and the sky broke apart, and everything crashed down on them. But really, that's the important part is the ongoing interaction with the world, and if they're actually able to experience, you know, emptiness, interconnectedness in their moment to moment experience. And I don't think everything that I've heard is that is not an experience like, oh, everything can be glowing now. It's just going to be very mundane in a way. You're just going to be just have a fundamental understanding and appreciation that yourself and everything else is not separate, you know, and that experience is beyond words. It's non-conceptual.
So if we have the experience, do we maintain the experience? Or is the experience just something that we can reflect upon and call up when we need to? Or do we begin to become the embodiment of that experience, that we begin to be the life of true nature?
We're talking about the experience of enlightenment. Generally, well, there's a lot of different opinions on this in the different schools of Buddhism, but generally the point of view in Tibetan Buddhism is the point of view that's expressed in so-called Buddhist epistemology, pramana, and that there are two kinds of knowledge. The first kind of knowledge is knowledge through immediate experience. When you see the blue sky, you know that the sky is blue. When you taste something that's hot, you know that it's hot. And then there's what we call subsequent experience. We take something that we've seen and then we put it in a category, we put a label on it. Generally, we classify it and we understand it through concepts. So it's always said that it's said that the experience of enlightenment is the first kind of experience. It's something like tasting something or seeing the sky is blue. Now, what makes this a little harder to relate to is that we're talking about a non-dual experience. Non-dual meaning that a normal way of relating to experience is I'm inside and the experience is outside. So when we talk about the experience of enlightenment, what gets realized is who we really are. So it's no separation between the experiencer and the experience. They're both together in a unity. And you can say that the experiencer tends to disappear, and so does the experience. It's a hard thing to describe without being paradoxical, because it's so different from the kind of experience that we have normally in our life. So, but as far as it being permanent or not, in Buddhist philosophy, they always talk about the four paths and the fruitions. So there's the first moment of the experience of enlightenment, and then there's the subsequent realization of it, which is what continues on.
Is that when the consciousness or the brain catches up with the experience and tries to conceptualize it?
Well, it's never a conceptual experience, but they always draw a distinction in Buddhist philosophy between the first moment of enlightenment and subsequent moments. So they call it path consciousness and fruition consciousness. And so it does make that distinction, but actual nature of that from experiential point of view Of course, I couldn't tell you because I'm not enlightened yet. So I couldn't really tell you. But yeah, they do draw a distinction. Now, another thing that should be said, something I heard from Kempo Kartar, is that at first when you have some kind of realization, you have it and then it disappears, and then you get it again, then it disappears. So it kind of wavers like a sine wave until more as you go along, it becomes more and more stable. So the experience of whatever level of realization you have eventually becomes more or less well, I don't like to use the word permanent because it's against the idea of impermanence, but it becomes stable at one point. But at first it's unstable. You have it for a moment and then you lose it and then you get it again and then you
Well, you
lose
can
it
have
again.
doubts about it. You're not sure about it.
Well, that too, but it's not just doubts. You actually lose the entire thing. It just becomes a memory for a while, and then you get it again. You experience it again. So it might be that you have some sort of experience of realization uh, during or right after your meditation practice.
Well, is that vicarious or is that your experience?
What do you mean? This is what Kempo Kartar told
So
me.
it's vicarious.
Yeah, well, I trust what he said. He wasn't light, so I don't doubt that what he said was true. So there's that. Anyway, so
So it's like seeing love and then realizing love and then seeing love everywhere, seeing everything as love.
well, it's like well, you're right. That's another aspect of it. It at first your understanding of what enlightenment is very narrow, and this is explained better. Generally one first experiences enlightenment or any kind of level realization, not necessarily enlightenment, during the practice of meditation. So there becomes a contrast between meditation and one's ordinary way of thinking. And it takes a while before you realize that your ordinary way of thinking is also enlightenment can be expressed in that too. So it's not just your quiet, peaceful moments that are enlightened. It's in the midst of all sorts of turmoil that enlightenment expresses itself as well. And the analogy for that is that when a fire is small, if you toss a big log on top of it, you'll smother the fire. But if the fire is strong, you toss a big log on it, the the fire only gets that much brighter and hotter. So that's how one eventually realizes that what we normally call the kleshas can be seen as an expression of enlightenment as well. So there's actually instructions in the practice that once you get to a certain point, you're supposed to deliberately provoke in yourself a feeling of anger or a feeling of lust, and then just look at that feeling and seeing what its nature is. And you see its nature is no different than the nature of enlightenment as well. So that's not a practice for beginners, obviously, but it's to make you realize that you're never apart from enlightenment, even in your most supposedly deluded moments.
Well, I think it's important for me to say that when I first experienced love, that was beyond familiar love, family love, that was beyond, sexual love, that was, it could only be described as something like spiritual love or something like that, that I've never been the same. It never left me. You know, it may have been covered up for a time, but I could take a couple of minutes and get right back there. And
Okay, well,
that truly has been my experience.
yeah, well, this is something I used to say at Susquehanna. Everyone knows how the love of one person can change your life. And if just loving one person can change your life so much, imagine what it's like to love all sentient beings. That's just going to be like a revolution. So yeah, there's nothing more life-changing than really experiencing what genuine spiritual love. That's why we're all here, really, is to experience that.
Well, that's right. And you know, and there's many examples. There's not just one example. You know, there's many examples. You know, back in the day, we used to say, you know, that there was an avatar. Now the avatars, what? Now they're, you know, things that we use in games or something. I don't partake of that myself. But the point was that the avatar was someone who, or was something that kind of became an association with that oneness or something like that. I don't know if I'm too far off with that, but the avatar was somebody like Jesus was an avatar.
Oh yeah, that's the
Shakyamuni
idea
Buddha
from
was an
Hinduism.
avatar. You
It's the
know,
idea from from Hinduism, basically, that
yeah,
God can manifest in various forms.
and that those forms are everywhere.
Well, sure, and you have the same idea in Buddhism and the idea of the Bodhisattva.
Yeah. So
And
it's not that it happened 2,600 years ago. It's happening right now, and it'll never stop happening. It's always happened. It's birthless and it's deathless.
yeah,
It's signless and it's
wishless,
wishlessness.
doorless, signless, and wishless. Right.
Yes, it's all of that. It's being free of all those things. You know, any of the things that we think it is pulls us away further from it.
Mhm.
I have a quote from the Shin Ming: "To return to the root is to find the essence, but to pursue appearances or enlightenment is to miss the source. To awaken even for a moment is to go beyond appearances and emptiness." So you can't, you don't want to be caught up in looking at either one, because when you create that duality, then that creates an obstruction.
Yeah, so in samadhi, in describing samadhi, there's a particular line that says it is the the termination of conceptual elaboration.
Bernie, I appreciate what you said about trying to imagine, the love that you feel for your spouse, and as if you felt that love for all sentient beings. I think that's a nice way to put it, to frame that experience.
Well, thank you.
And I guess the Bodhisattva vow to save all beings is kind of like fake it till you make it.
Well,
Well,
isn't that the point of the mother sentient beings? You know, that even beyond your spouse is your mother.
yeah. Well, it's an the Bodhisattva first is an aspiration, and then it becomes an actual practice. So for beginners like us, it's more an aspiration. It's very difficult to not have negative feelings towards somebody and towards anybody, I mean. And so it's hard to love everybody without exception. I think that's only becomes 100% possible when one has an understanding of emptiness, because with emptiness, you understand how everyone is suffering for no reason at all, because it's just their delusions that make them suffer. And even the worst criminal is just acting out of delusion and not out of not from any other reason. So you can have compassion for everybody.
I have a question regarding something Bernie just said. Suffering for no reason, right, Bernie? Is that what you said? I think.
Did I say that? I could have.
So,
yeah,
suffering
well,
for no
sure.
reason, yeah,
Okay, sure. People suffer for no reason
yeah.
because it's their delusions. They're trying to they're looking for happiness in the wrong place, is the way it's usually phrased. They're trying to they're searching for happiness, and because they're looking for it in the wrong way, they only get suffering.
The reason I ask is I suspect that true enlightenment dispels fear, and that a lot of the suffering is fear-based. I remember I was a young guy in my mid-20s in San Diego, California, on a business trip, and on the other side of the country, I said, well, I want to go see the beach. And at night, I walked over to the beach, and there were these 2 or 3 homeless guys under a bus thing, where the buses pick people up.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, oh, well, should we get a drink now? And and I never forgot that. It scared the heck out of me, because I thought, well, someday, if I'm not careful, I'm sure they were good guys and something bad happened and I could wind up like that. And what am I going to do to make sure that's never me? That fear has gripped me for the rest of my life. It's affected business and work decisions I've made to play it safe. And it's just such an unenlightened view, being driven by fear like that. And I'd love to get the perspective. Is that what enlightenment does? Does it dispel fear so you realize what a stupid delusion that is?
Well, what do you think of Talopa?
Yeah. Well, it's all based on perspective.
What was Talopa? He was living on the beach,
right,
eating entrails. He gave up being a very wealthy Brahmin and just lived on the beach. Didn't look for anybody, didn't look for anything. And if something came to him, he would deal with it.
So
if he
that's
left him, he would deal with that.
Right. These guys may have been living a perfectly happy life. It's my view of what
right.
their lives are. I'm assuming that there's something wrong with these guys, but
right.
Yeah. Or how society might judge them.
Right.
So some of the teachings that have been meaningful to me have said that it's not that you're trying to get rid of these emotions like fear. You want to be able to recognize the fear, be aware of the fear, and then make decisions despite the fear, and not have the fear be something that's, directing your life. It's your awareness of the emotions. You have all the regular emotions. You can have the awareness of the emotions, but the emotions don't drive your decisions. They can, that helps me think about it that way.
Well,
Chogyam Trungpa would say, you don't need to go beyond fear and not have fear. You just need to recognize fear. And then once you recognize fear, you can still act with that fear in mind.
Well, isn't there a practical aspect? The Buddha was enlightened, 35 years old or something like that? But then for the next 50 years almost, he lived a human life as a Buddha. So he wasn't subject to the attachment or the aversion of emotions, but the emotions were flowing right through. I think that's the lesson. It's a human experience. This whole thing is human experience. This whole thing is a story. This whole Dharma is a story. Created by a human being and sustained by human beings, added to by human beings, about being a human being. But being a complete human being. Not just one who is a physical being, not one who's just an intellectual being, because that's where most of us spend all our time, being intellectual, but also being a spiritual human being and finding that state of flux, finding that equilibrium, finding that equanimity, and being able to sustain that. Being a Buddha does not mean that we're not a human being.
Yeah, and when he was talking about seeing the noble monk, I think that can become a stereotype, like that people latch on to, and like, oh, well, if you're going to be Buddhist and you're going to be peaceful all the time, and you're never going to get upset, and if you're never going to be really sad, and you're never going to be really happy. And I think that then that becomes like something that people aspire to, and they still have all those emotions. They just kind of repress them so that they can have this Buddhist persona. It just becomes an ego thing. Like, oh, now I'm a Buddhist, so I'm going to act all these certain ways. It's not really honest at how they're feeling, but they're just trying to put on another way to kind of pump themselves up. So that's something to be, I question myself about, make sure that I'm giving an honest response to things and not trying to give a Buddhist response to things.
Well, sure. If I mean, to use the example of Shakyamuni Buddha, do you think that when one of his attendants or one of his disciples who was with him for 25 years passed away or something, he didn't have some kind of an emotion about that? Or did he have the emotion and he felt the emotion? He allowed the emotion to come up and everything. Maybe he cried, oh, I'm going to miss that person. Oh, they died a painful death or whatever it is. But then he quickly was able to rise over that or transcend that, whatever you want to say, realize that that was just a temporary emotion that was coming through that was perfectly normal, natural human response. And that's being a Buddha.
Well, I liked his at the end when the Buddha's dream, when he has to climb the great mountain of excrement. that's pretty. That's a pretty.
And he wasn't stained by it.
Wasn't stained by it, but he still had to climb it, and it was pretty revolting.
For somebody else, but for him.
No, he said it was revolting. An abhorrent and revolting mountain of excrement. Yet he succeeds to remain free from stains. So that just speaks to that idea of feeling, just, you have the feeling, but even though you have the feelings, you don't let them direct your actions. So even though it's revolting and abhorrent, he still climbs it and succeeds.
That was his dream, yes.
Yeah. It's kind of it's a very practical, dream. Here's a mountain excrement, I'm going to climb it. Here's a flood, all the people are being washed away, I'm going to build a boat and go save them. Here these people are illnesses, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to treat them.
Yeah, and the next verse talks about, rivers overflowing and floods and so on. And my goodness, what's happening right now down in North Carolina? It's happening every day.
By the
War.
way, have you heard about Paula's mother? Is she in good shape or what?
Well, she passed away.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
know
she's
that.
been gone for
Oh,
8 years or something.
I
But her
didn't know
sister's
that.
down there, and
Sis-
her sister hasn't had electricity since Friday or something. But
no.
they're coping. They're doing okay.
Okay, that's good to hear.
But there's lots of other people who are not. I mean, 600 people are missing right now.
Oh, it's terrible situation. It's quite remarkable that it's so bad.
But it goes back to this point here, that all these calamities happen and so on. All these things are part of life, being a human being, but being able to accept it and be able to deal with it in a pure way. That's one of the things that, what is it to be Buddha? Is to have a pure mind. And ordinary beings have an impure mind. So the mind is when the brain and the heart mind, come into an equilibrium. And when that purity is there, that stability is there, that's the Buddha nature, that's the true nature. The impure mind is being affected by those emotions, being affected by the ego.
The ego is so much of the problem. The older I get, the more it's amazing how much the ego drives us as humans in ways we don't even realize.
On that note, I want to ask this crowd, like, how do you not get anxious about the end of our comfortable being for the time being?
I'm not sure. What do you mean, death?
Yes, well, not necessarily sickness or accidents, and like how you how do you not get obsessed that gosh, I don't have much time. Like, am I ready? Am I practicing enough? Do I need to practice more? I mean, am I even if I practice mm, like to the to my best ability, what kind of results I'm gonna achieve? Stuff like that.
Hmm. I know how I handle it, but I'm going to be very long-winded, so I want somebody else to go first.
For me, when I'm anxious about things, I try and be aware of that, try to identify what it is, and then try and see if there's something I can do for the anxiety. And then, just recognize some things are going to make you anxious, and you're just going to be anxious. I mean, just the way it is. I mean, people have different karma, and some people get anxious, some people don't. I get anxious whenever I have to give a Dharma talk. It seems like the more I give, the less anxiety I have. But I mean, it's just there. There's lots of different causes and conditions that have come into play. And I think over time, as you work on it, you work with your anxiety, um, you're able to transform it into something else. But depending on what the anxiety is, it might take a really long time. It may take more than one lifetime. But I think the most important thing for me is to be aware of when I'm anxious, and try to identify what's bringing that feeling on. Not that you can necessarily change feelings anxious. Some things are going to always make you anxious.
I think an answer to that might be writing your own prayer. Look at your own anxiety. the causes and the conditions of your own anxiety, and write a prayer about that, about how you can transcend that the result of the anxiety, how you can how you can neutralize the anxiety. I did that with anger. I was having, I still had anger. Why am I having anger? So I sat down one day and I wrote a prayer to myself about what I think about anger. And it helped me tremendously. I come back to it every now and again, and it's really, really good because it's your anxiety. You got to deal with it. It was my anger. I had to deal with it.
So, Alex, I am a world-class catastrophizer, and I'm not sure if we all know what that is. Catastrophizing is a little something bad happens, and then we assume that the absolute worst is going to happen, right? I have a mosquito bite, I think it's a tumor, right? That's catastrophizing, all right? And I'm going to talk.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would never have thought it's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing I catastrophize the most about is not being able to provide for my children being poor, homeless, hungry. That scares the heck out of me. It really does. And so how do I deal with that? I just remind myself that usually the things that scare us the most never happen. That 95% of our anxiety is spinning our wheels over stuff that just really, it's all up here. It's something that will never come to fruition in real life. And if it does, you do the best you can with what you have. And and that's why I'm involved on the Dharma path, is to try to help get some perspective and shed some of that irrational anxiety.
Alex, do you have Netflix?
Yes, I do.
So there used to be a show on Netflix called Michael Tuesday and Thursday, and the guy Michael goes to see the show is about Michael. He has all these social phobias, and the therapist, it's a comedy, but the therapist is always using exposure therapy to help him get over these different social phobias that cause him all this anxiety. It's kind of a light look at anxiety. Sometimes, if you can laugh about something that's bothering you, it can help you kind of deal with it. So.
Well, not that I have a real problem, but I may develop one when I start getting really sick or something like that, or feel really old. Actually, sometimes it's getting that close. So,
But the four common preliminaries, right? The first one is the precious human life and how you can use that to inspire you in the truth of impermanence and the suffering of samsara, and the truth of karma. Those using those four things as part of your daily practice. I think that's helpful to deal with. I don't have enough time. I got to practice before I die. That's like been codified into a prayer.
yeah. What keeps me uh, more or less stable, I would say, is that, like, knowing that there is a path. The path is not designed for superhumans. It's designed for real humans, for ordinary humans, and uh, you can be better at that or not as good, but I think it should work for most people. A little bit lazy people, a little bit distracted people, a little bit, I don't know, wakey people, nerdy people, and all that.
Alex, you know what afflicts
So,
people in the West a lot, in my opinion? Needing to be important, needing to be special. And when
yeah,
you shed that need to be important and special and embrace the Dharma of just egolessness, It helps a lot too.
That's a great point. I at some point I came across this realization, and it it simplified my life so tremendously. Um, Especially like in the world of science, like you constantly hear about that great person, such a great achievements and this kind of great results. And like you think, how come I'm not doing all that? I probably not, dummy, and all that. But also you realize sometimes people get really lucky, and sometimes people get just, you know, just happen to be in the right place in the right time, or have good people around them that may be helpful too. So I frankly have nothing to complain. Yeah, but you have a good point.
The eight worldly concerns,
Yeah.
that's expressed in the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma and the impermanence part. The eight worldly concerns.
Dorje, would you agree that in Buddhism there's not really any luck? That it's all causes and conditions. It's all your karma. There's no such thing as luck, really.
Yeah, that's something that you can say it. Is luck a part of chaos? Is that just beneficial chaos or something like that when things come? Miracles, all those kinds of things. In Buddhism, they might call it merit. They might call it, skyfarers. They might call it dakinis, blessings, whatever, But I don't think about those. I try not to think about those things. If the thought comes into my mind, I have to let it go, because it's just a never-ending circle.
Yeah, I agree. You can't really trace all the causes and conditions for any event. I read something that said that the Buddha said if you tried to trace all the causes and conditions, your brain would explode, your head would explode. But I think that just because we can't trace them doesn't mean it's chaos. I just mean that we can't trace it because we're human beings. I don't think there's chaos. I think there's causes and conditions.
Yes, I do agree. And to me, like I see value in Buddhism, that it offers this kind of mindset, that hey, whoever does better than you, it may be for a good reason. It's very much probably because they have merit, they have worked hard in the past, maybe past lives, if we cannot trace it to current life. So all we gotta do is do our best, and eventually it will come to us. Whatever we deserve, it's gonna be there.
It doesn't matter how we got here. It's just that we're here, and now we have to tread the excellent path of peace to enlightenment.
Yes, we'll just shouldn't just screw up big time. Otherwise, it's gonna be with good intentions. You and not just intentions, of course, doing putting intentions to the practice, which is not really super hard. It will get to the results.
Well, also, if you think about the four immeasurables, in sympathetic joy, that other person's happiness is available to you as your happiness, and that other person's suffering is available to you also. That's why you feel compassion for them. So that's a way to work against that idea, like, they're doing really well, I'm jealous. But if you can consider that that's just a delusion, that's not you enjoying that happiness there. That's just part, really, that's your experience. You as a living sentient being, you are part of the universe. You are part of that joy. So you can appreciate that and experience that. Really, that's your joy. the better they do, the more joy you can feel. I think that's a difficult mindset for us because we're all individualistic and, come from this culture. But I think that's the teachings, that suffering is your
I
suffering.
agree. Yeah, yeah. I agree. That's an excellent point, and this is also helps us to do better, because if we joyful, we create, we learn from them, right? It's much easier to learn from somebody when you're thinking positively of them rather than being negative and jealous of them. So you can learn and build on that. And yeah, great point.
One of our great translators in our lineage pointed out that it's that the translation for the joy is empathetic joy rather than sympathetic joy. Some translators have called it sympathetic joy, and there's a particular connotation to that. But the empathetic joy, there's a different connotation to that. And that's the one that is important in bodhicitta, is the empathetic joy. It makes all the difference.
What's the distinction between the two, Amadorja?
Well, without looking up it in the dictionary, sympathy has an element of pity to it. Oh, I'm so glad I'm not like that. That's my joy. But empathetic joy is, I'm so glad that you're happy. I had nothing to do with your happiness, but I'm glad that you're happy. I'm glad that you're helping other people. I had nothing to do with it, but yet, I think you said it, I share in your joy. The sympathy is, I'm glad I don't have that. So that came by way of Kenmo Trinley, Kenmo Trinley, I can't think of her name now. Kenmo Trinley,
I think it'd be wise that we
Chojun, Kenmo Trinley Chojun.
Yeah, we could just stick with joy and say we can experience joy with everyone. We just
Well, that's true.
joy is our own. Then we get rid of that word. We don't have to deal with it. We just go directly,
That's
more direct.
That's a true fact. Well, I think this was an excellent conversation. Thank you all very much for everybody's comments and being part of this discussion. I think it was very good. And Bernie, are you okay? You kept wigging out there. Was that a power supply problem or something?
That's my internet connection. In rainy weather, it sometimes goes out for a while.
Oh, are you on a satellite dish or something?
No, but it's just how it is. When the weather's rainy and the ground gets wet, I sometimes lose the connection for a bit.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Brendan, you're the Umze this evening. Would you recite the dedication prayers and maybe a simple dedication prayer, either on page 35 or if you want to do the whole dedication prayer on 36, that's fine.
All right. Dedication prayer. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of Yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate root of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratya Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, and arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Om, ah, om, om, ah, om, om, ah, om. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much. So we recorded this and we'll put it up on YouTube soon. So thank you very much. I hope to see you again soon. And our Sunday practice, we're doing Sunday practice, and it'd be great if you can join us sometime. And everybody that does enjoys it. We don't get enough people. All right. Talk to you all soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.